on In Excess before we kick it over to review number 2?
Nope.
I don't think so.
I'm glad we covered it because In Excess was a legitimately big band.
Oh, they were
and
huge. Yeah.
I think for a while, like they were talking about them as being one of the big bands of like one of those bands that would go from the 80s into being a big important band in the 90s, you know, like a U2 and REM type band. But unfortunately, it just didn't seem to happen for them.
Yeah, and this is so funny. Like I was just wondering, I'm like, I wonder what album this is in their discography. It's number 6.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, and it's like easily like 90% of my INXS knowledge is this record. You know? So
I know they pretty famously did an album after this that was experimental, that was like a complete bomb.
X.
Yeah, I remember even at the time, like reading reviews of it because when I was a kid, I would read music magazines, and you didn't quite get them. You know what I mean? It was just like you read it, say what's good, what's bad, and you have no real concept. But it was helpful at times of helping to set my taste a little bit. And I can definitely remember reading a review of like that album X where it was like, this is horrible. It's like, ooh. So
well, it starts off good. It's got Suicide and Disappear, Suicide Blonde and Disappear, which were pretty big.
Oh, that's right,
songs.
Disappear. That's another one.
That's a good song.
Yep.
But I'm looking at the other tracks and nothing's jumping. Bitter Tears. That sounds somewhat familiar. But most of my knowledge of INXS.
I imagine they'll go something like Bitter Tears, Bitter Tears. You know, like you could kind of from this album, you kind of feel like what it might sound like because of
this album cover is not very good. Also, I don't like it.
It's very
basic, like Photoshop.
It looks like the "Need You Tonight" video a little bit. You know, when it's just like Michael Hutchence floating in front of your face. You know, remember Matt the video? He's kind of like there, and then
The skateboard's a weird touch.
Yeah,
that's the part that stands out there. It's like, what's the random?
There's no skateboarding in the
like
album.
Shins and feet and
It looks like it could also be an advertisement for like a store selling clothes too, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like a New York Times
the Gap
billboard for
American Eagle or something.
Yeah.
So that's but okay. Well, check it out. It's an important album in terms of sales, and if you want to hear the albums that caught the zeitgeist, that this one definitely falls in that category. So
that's a good word. That's a good zeitgeist is the word for this album, I think.
There you go. And don't underestimate, by the way, what having a lead singer with presence can have in terms of the visual era of MTV, because that was a big piece of this band's success too, was the visuals. So
yeah, they're kind of well, okay, we can just keep moving.
Yeah, that's okay. So review number 2. Josh is going to start us out on this one. So Matt, go ahead and run the numbers, and then we'll let Josh take number 1 on this.
All right. So this is Talk Talk with The Color of Spring. Comes in at number 61 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums. Number 6 in 1986. I forgot we're doing some 86 and some 87 tonight. This is we're merging over. It's number 441 of all time. It's Talk Talk's 3rd highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. And we should be covering the other two because one's in the 90s, Laughing Stock, ranked number 34 in the 90s, and Spirit of Eden, we're going to cover in a full episode.
We will be covering both of them. Yep.
Yep. So there you go. It is not on Rolling Stone's list, and Talk Talk is ranked at number 82 of overall artist rankings, so pretty highly regarded there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I believe I'm starting, and I hated this album. This is going to be one of my worst reviews, I think, in terms of this. I would classify Talk Talk, at least based on this album, as kind of ambient pop or some sort of like chill wave.
Well, here they are. Like this was a distinct direction change because they were like a new wave band before that. I mean, you may know them. Famously, they did that song "It's My Life," which No Doubt covered.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I wish we had listened to that album, whatever album that one was on, because I don't.
Yeah, that's from like a couple of years before this, so we're not going to do that album.
So well, not knowing anything about this band and what their future albums hold, if just based on this album, I really do not like this genre of music. That's what I term like slow music, or like it's like experimental pop music. I would say it's adjacent to dream pop in some ways. So you guys and the audience knows how I feel about dream pop. So this was a struggle for me. And the longer I listened to it, the more patience I lost, and the more negative my notes got as I listened to the album. So there's a progression from song to song of me saying, this is too long, this is too slow, this is horrible, I hate this album. It just keeps going on and on and on. So so despite that, let me try and say some positive things. I think it's a pretty atmospheric album overall. If you like something that's like kind of house music like, or maybe a precursor to house music in some ways, this is going to be up your alley. It's kind of got some acoustic nature to it as well, like in a song like I Don't Believe in You. It's got acoustic instrument, there's some organ on there. He is it a band or a single guy? I don't know. Regardless, like,
it's a band.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a band.
They're throwing in some different instruments, I think, and trying some things out. Life's What You Make It, which is the song I put on the opening montage, has some piano that pops out for me that kind of got through the droning that I experienced. And in Living in Another World, there's some harmonica and like a bongo beat that's interesting. But overall, I found this album just kind of interminable, and it just was not something I enjoyed, and it's going to be really low on my overall rankings for cold listens. And I only listened to it once because I could not get through it again. So that's how I felt about it.
Okay. This was a tough listen for me too. So I think I have some similarities, Josh. I will say this album is much better experienced on headphones than in stereo. So I'll start by saying that, because you pick up a lot more nuances on headphones. And I'm starting to find that in general, 80s albums are experienced better on headphones, I'm finding. And so I'm often doing one listen where I'm on headphones and one listen where I'm off headphones. And the headphones listen was superior. I really liked the song Give It Up. Was a real gem for me. I love the bass line in that song. There were, though, and Josh, I kind of hear what you're saying, there were a few too many songs that didn't seem to have a hypothesis for like what they were doing.
Yeah.
It just existed sort of, and I kind of was like, okay, like, and it the challenge for me was that it wasn't melodic enough to draw me in. It wasn't challenging enough to get me to listen to it from that angle. It just sort of existed. This has to be a concept album, right, about spring, because yeah. it's too atmospheric, and I definitely could draw sort of a thematic sound on this album of kind of a concept of spring and nature. The lyrics didn't totally fill me in, I think, in terms of what the exact the exact theme was. So I struggled a little bit with that. Like I especially something that was like as specific as April 5th. I was like, okay, let me see if I can do that. But kind of the song was more like, she's coming from the ground, it's a gentle spring, let me breathe the color of the spring. So I said, okay, it's atmospheric. So I guess, is it a specific April 5th, that he's invoking, the concept of, right? But yeah, it was difficult for me to bite my teeth into anything here. And so as a result, I was hoping like the second listen, it would like unlock something for me, but my second listen was very similar to the first listen, outside of the fact that I picked up the bass lines more pronounced on the second listen in headphones, which made it a slightly more pleasurable listen for me. So I knew they changed directions. I'm not super familiar with Talk Talk. I knew they moved away from being a new wave band, like the part of the band I know a little bit better, to like an experimental band, and that didn't scare me off at all. And I know they take on a lot of different incarnations in these next couple albums, but yeah, this specific incarnation didn't speak to me, I have to say. So yeah, I have to give this one a thumbs down, I think, on my end as well. Matt, what do you think?
I might be the dissenting vote here.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to talk about it more highly after what you guys just said about it than what I was planning on saying about it. But I mean, okay, so a couple of things. When I first listened to it, I wasn't sure what to make of it. There was definitely like I kind of knew that they were a little bit more of a new wave kind of band, and actually I totally forgot that they were the ones that did that "It's My Life" song. And oddly enough, within the first couple of songs, the first time I listened to it, I'm like, man, this sounds like that. It's my, like, there's parts of it where the song like would go almost like up in that range of where "It's My Life" the chorus kicks in. There's similar strong song structures, I guess is what I'm saying, with some of these tunes, and that's the song that popped in my head. And maybe the guy's voice, there was a little subliminal, like, subconscious thing happening there. But then I was like, oh yeah, that was the band that did that song. So I did notice some similarities there. So I think. It took me a little bit to get into it. I found myself gravitating towards something like "Life's What You Make It," which kind of comes in with more of a groove. The first two songs are much more kind of on the chill, atmospheric vibe. And they were longer, right? 6.5 minutes, 5 minutes, between "Happiness Is Easy" and "I Don't Believe in You." And so I was kind of like not exactly sure what to make of that. So I liked it when they picked it up. I liked it also when they picked it up again, like in "Living in Another World" and "Give It Up." So I was like, okay, there's some grooves happening here. So I was, having something to, connect with there. And the more I listened to it, the more I just got into it. I wouldn't say that I love this record, but I definitely liked it. I was surprised that I was kind of taken back a little bit by, like I hate this, it's like, really, like it's not that I don't know how it's offensive. I mean,
I didn't hate it like in that way. It didn't draw strong emotions from me.
Yeah, to me, this is more of a night album. This is like a chill, like and it can fade into the background, right? Because and I actually like music that does that sometimes. I don't need it to always like resonate with me or whatever. Sometimes it's nice to just kind of have this relaxing kind of sound in the background that's just kind of puts you at ease a little bit. But the more I listened to it, the more I got into some of the songs. Not all of them. Like, I don't think "April 5th" or Chameleon Day, is that even a song? That's kind of like some, I don't know.
It's like a soundscape, I would say, right?
It's like a little residence-esque, if you will. "April 5th" was a little bit of a slog, but other than those two, like I did like, many of these songs. "Happiness Is Easy," "I Don't Believe You." There's some soul, kind of like blue-eyed soul stuff happening there a little bit with the guy's voice, which I did enjoy. I do think he's got a good voice. And I thought "Time It's Time," the last track, was kind of creepy. Like, it's got like the background singers are kind of like, it's almost like a horror film, like the like the Omen or something like that. The way that they're singing that. So, but it wasn't like this overpowering thing that took me away from it. I just thought it was kind of an interesting choice that they did. Yeah. So yeah, I think I kind of don't mind. I mean, house music seems a bit of a stretch to me. I think of house as way more upbeat. I mean, this is definitely like electronic and somewhat experimental, but I don't know if I would go so far as to call it in the same vein as house music.
I'll give you another one. I felt it delved into like that new romantic sound a little bit at times too. And I actually found this to be kind of a lesser version of the lane that I thought Roxy Music did very well. Would be kind of a comparison.
Yeah, I liked Roxy Music better as well. But like, generally speaking, stuff like this, I kind of like. I don't mind long, like, songs that are kind of a little bit more electronic. If they find a groove, or if you find like a nice little, sonic, kind of structure that you're going with. It's got like a little ambient. Yeah, I like ambient music. Would you dream pop? All that stuff I kind of like, in and of itself. So I know that you weren't so high on some of that stuff that we did earlier, Josh. So it makes sense that you
or Roxy Music, really.
Or Roxy, yeah, right. You weren't that into Roxy Music, which I really liked, actually, Avalon, and that was way different than what was the first Roxy Music album that we did? Yeah,
Well,
that's
there
like
was
Brian
about
Eno stuff. That's way different than what
there was
Avalon
about 10 years difference between
Yeah.
the timing of those two. Not quite, but like 8 maybe. Yeah.
But if it's going back in the archives here, but I remember liking Avalon way more than, just responding to that more than For Your Pleasure. So
I was a fan too of both, actually.
So I'm a thumbs up on this. I mean, it's certainly not for everybody, as you could tell by our takes on this. But it's, if you like kind of, really, to me, it's a very pleasing, kind of electronic ambient sound, which is a nice thing to kind of have on the background at night. There's some grooves on here. There's some good. I like his voice. It's very. Yeah, it's kind of a good album to put on at night when you want to just kind of relax. For the most part, a couple of duds, I'd say, but for the most part, I enjoyed it, and I thought it ended strongly. I liked "Time It's Time." That I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's up there as like one of the 2 or 3 top songs on this. So I'll go thumbs up. I would recommend this. But I also with a caveat of it, it like me, it took a couple listens before I really started letting it be what it is, because that first listen, I will admit, that was just like, well, what's happening here? I wasn't. I thought it was going to be more upbeat, I guess, and it's not that, right? And so maybe we'll get that later. We're going to do them a couple more times, and as John said, that this is different than where they were, maybe where they were going. So I'm interested to see what happens with that.
It's definitely different than their earlier albums. I'm not as familiar with the ones that we're going to be covering, so I can't speak to them, but I can definitely tell you that it sounds different than their first couple albums.
Yeah, I was surprised when I looked to see where this falls in the rankings, that it was ranked so high, and that it's their 3rd highest rated album. And so, like, I had heard of these guys, but I didn't know they were so well regarded. At least, I mean, it's best ever albums. It's just one thing, but apparently a lot of people love them. So yeah. But I'd go thumbs up. I don't think it's as bad as these guys making it out to be. So there you go.
You went all New York right there. Oh, I think,
yeah. I think, the more albums we listen to, the more we're able to, or I'm able to, kind of hone in on what works for me and what doesn't. And seems, for better or for worse, there's kind of only a smaller amount of area where I'm willing to or able to kind of, I don't know, push the boundaries a bit or find something new. I don't know. We do this podcast to listen to new music, or music we haven't heard before, and like definitely found stuff, but I think it's rare that I find something that's completely like out of my wheelhouse. It's more like finding bands that are adjacent to other bands I've heard before, or influences of bands, or I don't know, just some like new pop band that it's still a pop band ultimately for me. So I don't know. It's like, I think this whole kind of genre of music that this falls into, the synth pop stuff, at least the more ambient synth pop stuff, just doesn't kind of as a genre work for me, I'm finding.
Yeah, I think that's where you and I are a little different, Josh, in that like I can have genres that I don't like, but I like the idea of having a hierarchy even within those genres. And like, so I hear what you're saying. There's certain sounds that, although I'm starting to learn over time that I don't have as many like deal breaker genres, I think, as maybe you do, and even at times, sometimes Matt has some deal breaker genres. Like I have some sounds I don't love, but even things that were supposed to be my deal breakers, right? Pink Floyd, Paul Simon, Graceland stuff. Like I don't think I have that deal breaker quality, right, to my deal breakers, and I can kind of, and that's where I like, with like how we did